He slid the divorce papers across the mahogany table, a smug, pitiful smile playing on his lips. Liam thought he had it all figured out: dump his supposedly penniless, unambitious wife, marry his wealthy corporate boss, and secure the CEO position at his newly acquired tech firm. What he didn't know was that the secretive, multi-billion-dollar private equity firm that just bought his company out from under him belonged to exactly one man, his father-in-law. And the ink on those divorce papers wasn't just ending a marriage, it was the signature that would systematically dismantle Liam's entire life. This is a story of greed, betrayal, and the ultimate boardroom revenge. Chloe Hayes lived a life that most people would describe as aggressively ordinary. She worked as a mid-level botanist at the New York Botanical Garden, wore clothes without visible logos, and drove a 5-year-old Subaru crossover. To her husband, Liam, she was the epitome of middle-class stagnation. He loved her once, or at least he had convinced himself he did when they met in college. Back then, her lack of interest in material things was charming. It grounded him. But after 5 years of marriage, as Liam climbed the cutthroat corporate ladder in Manhattan's tech sector, that charm had curdled into deep resentment. What Liam didn't know, what nobody knew, save for a few fiercely loyal wealth managers in Geneva and a small army of NDA-bound attorneys, was that Chloe's maiden name, Rutherford, carried a weight that could crush economists. Her father, Arthur Rutherford, was a ghost in the financial world. He wasn't on the Forbes billionaire list because his wealth had long surpassed the need for magazine rankings. He was a pioneer in early algorithmic trading in the late 80s, who then quietly pivoted to cornering massive, unglamorous markets: lithium mining, commercial shipping lanes, and deep-tier private equity. Through a labyrinth of shell companies and trusts, Arthur possessed a net worth that whispered into the trillion-dollar range. Arthur had raised Chloe with a singular paranoid philosophy: money attracts parasites. If you want to be loved for who you are, they must never know what you have. So Chloe hid it, flawlessly. The beige sweaters Liam constantly mocked for looking like thrift store rags were actually bespoke Loro Piana cashmere, spun directly in Italy, costing more than Liam's monthly salary. The weird old watch she wore on special occasions wasn't a flea market find, it was a vintage Patek Philippe, one of only 3 in existence, gifted by her grandfather. Liam, meanwhile, was entirely consumed by the facade of wealth. He was an ambitious director of operations at Helios Dynamics, a rapidly growing data analytics firm based in Hudson Yards. Liam wore flashy, off-the-rack designer suits, leased a BMW he could barely afford, and spent his evenings networking at exclusive spots like Catch NYC and Le Bernardin, desperate to rub elbows with the elite. Lately, those evenings were spent entirely with Victoria Caldwell. Victoria was the senior vice president of strategy at Helios. She came from old Rhode Island money, drove a Porsche Panamera, and dripped with a kind of aggressive corporate superiority that Liam found intoxicating. Where Chloe offered warm, quiet evenings at their modest apartment in Queens, Victoria offered a gateway to the high life. They began their affair in the VIP lounge of a hotel in Tribeca, and from there, Liam's contempt for his wife only accelerated. "You just don't understand the game, Chloe," Liam snapped one Tuesday evening. He was adjusting a silk tie in the mirror, preparing for yet another late-night strategy meeting with Victoria. Chloe looked up from her tea, her heart sinking in a way that had become all too familiar. "I understand that you haven't been home for dinner in 3 weeks, Liam. You're burning yourself out for a company that would replace you in a day." Liam let out a harsh, patronizing laugh. "Replace me? Helios is on the verge of being acquired by Aegis Global. Do you even know who they are? They're an absolute titan in private equity. When this buyout happens, the restructuring is going to clear out the dead weight." "Victoria, is slated to take over as president, and she's already hinted that she wants me as her CEO. He turned to look at Chloe, his eyes scanning her simple jeans and bare face with undisguised distaste. I am moving into a different stratosphere, Chloe. I need to look the part. I need a life that reflects where I'm going. You're happy playing with plants in the dirt. We are just operating on different frequencies now. Chloe swallowed the lump in her throat. Marriage isn't a corporate merger, Liam. It's about who is there for you when the money runs out. That's exactly the kind of poor person mentality that's holding me back, Liam sneered, grabbing his leather briefcase. I won't let you anchor me down anymore. As the front door slammed shut, Chloe sat in the quiet of their living room. She glanced at her phone. On speed dial, labeled simply as Dad, was the man who actually owned Aegis Global, the very firm Liam was staking his entire future on. For years her father had urged her to tell Liam the truth, to test the man's character, but lately Chloe had started to realize she didn't need to reveal her wealth to see Liam's true colors. The lack of it had exposed him perfectly. 2 weeks later, the atmosphere in their Queen's apartment felt like a tomb. It was a Friday night. Chloe had prepared a roast, an olive branch, trying to find the man she had married somewhere beneath the layers of ambition and expensive cologne. Liam arrived at 9 p.m. He didn't take off his coat. He walked straight into the dining room, ignored the table setting, and threw a thick manila envelope onto the center of the table. It landed with a heavy, final thud, knocking over a crystal water glass. The water pooled around the edge of the paper. "What is this?" Chloe asked, her voice dangerously quiet. She didn't move to wipe up the spill. "It's over, Chloe," Liam said. His voice lacked any warmth, any hesitation. It was the clinical tone of a man firing an underperforming employee. "Those are divorce papers. I've already signed my section." Chloe stared at the envelope. Her chest tightened, a sharp, physical pain radiating through her ribs. "Just like that? No counseling? No conversation? There is nothing to converse about," Liam said, crossing his arms. "I've outgrown this. I've outgrown you. I need a partner who can stand beside me at Galas, who understands board politics, who actually brings value to my life, instead of just existing in it. Victoria and I, we're official. We're a power couple. Once the Aegis Global acquisition closes next week, we're going public with the relationship." Chloe looked up, her eyes locking onto his. "You're leaving me for your boss so you can secure a promotion." "I'm leaving you for a woman who is in my league," Liam corrected, a cruel smirk tugging at his mouth. "Look around, Chloe. This cramped apartment. Your hand-me-down clothes, your complete lack of drive. I am destined for the 1%. You are destined for mediocrity. I'm giving you a generous out. I'm letting you keep the Subaru and the savings in our joint account. It's more than you brought into this marriage." The sheer audacity of his statement hung in the air. The joint account held roughly $30,000. In Chloe's personal restricted trust fund alone, she earned $30,000 in interest every 45 minutes. She felt a tear slip down her cheek, mourning not the man standing in front of her, but the memory of the boy she had met at 21. The boy who had promised her the world on a park bench, sharing a $3 pretzel. That boy was dead, entirely consumed by the hollow man wearing the luxury suit. "If I sign these," Chloe said, a voice steadying, growing eerily calm, "there is no going back, Liam. You are severing all ties. You will get absolutely nothing from me ever again." Liam laughed out loud. It was a genuine, booming laugh. "Get nothing from you, Chloe. What could you possibly give me? Free admission to the botanical gardens? Sign the papers. My lawyers want this expedited so I have a clean slate before the merger." Chloe reached for the pen lying next to the envelope. Her hand didn't shake, She pulled the thick stack of legal documents out, flipped to the back page, and stared at the dotted line. "You're making the biggest mistake of your life," she whispered, the pen hovering. "My only mistake was marrying you instead of someone who mattered," Liam shot back. With a smooth, practiced motion, Chloe signed her name. Chloe Rutherford Hayes, soon to just be Rutherford again. She slid the papers back across the wet table. "Get out of my apartment." "Gladly," Liam said, snatching the papers like a prize. "I'll have my movers come for my things on Monday." "Enjoy the mediocre life, Chloe." When the door closed this time, Chloe didn't cry. The sorrow had instantly evaporated, replaced by a cold, crystalline clarity. She walked over to her purse, pulled out her phone, and dialed the number she had avoided using for 5 years. The line rang twice before a deep, gravelly voice answered. "Peanut, I was beginning to think you'd forgotten my number." "Hi, Dad," Chloe said, staring out the window at the flickering streetlights of Queens. "We sound different," Arthur Rutherford noted immediately. The sharp instincts that made him a titan of industry never missed a beat, especially when it came to his only daughter. "What happened?" He brought the papers. "I signed them." There was a heavy pause on the other end of the line. When Arthur spoke again, his voice had dropped an octave, resonating with a terrifying protective authority. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine, Dad." "Truly?" Chloe took a deep breath. "He left me for his VP, Victoria Caldwell. They're planning to take over Helios Dynamics after the acquisition next week. He thinks he's going to be the CEO of your subsidiary." A low, dark chuckle echoed through the phone. "Is that so?" "Well, Aegis Global is finalizing the paperwork this Tuesday. It seems I need to make some adjustments to the restructuring plan." "No, Dad," Chloe interrupted, her eyes narrowing as she looked at her reflection in the glass. "Don't just adjust the plan. I want to handle it. You've been asking me to step into the family business for years. To take a seat on the board. I think I'm finally ready." "You want to oversee the Helios transition?" Arthur asked, a distinct note of pride swelling in his voice. "I want to oversee the entire firm," Chloe said coldly. "And I want to be the one sitting at the head of the table on Tuesday when Liam walks in to claim his crown." "Consider it done," Arthur said. "Welcome to the real world, Chloe." Tuesday morning dawned bright and crisp over Manhattan. Inside the towering glass and steel skyscraper that housed Helios Dynamics, the atmosphere was electric. Today was the day. The Aegis Global acquisition was officially complete as of 8 a.m., and the mysterious new owners were sending their executive team for a 10:10 a.m. all-hands leadership meeting in the penthouse boardroom. Liam Hayes stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, sipping a macchiato, feeling like a king surveying his conquered lands. He wore a brand-new Tom Ford suit, a celebratory gift to himself, tailored to perfection. Next to him stood Victoria Caldwell, looking impossibly sharp in a crimson power suit, a diamond tennis bracelet glittering on her wrist. "Nervous?" Liam asked, leaning in close. Victoria scoffed elegantly. "Please. I've been analyzing Aegis Global's portfolio all weekend. They're a massive umbrella corporation, completely hands-off. They buy, they install aggressive leadership, and they let them run. Once I present our quarterly projections, they'll hand me the keys to the kingdom. And as president, my first executive order is making you CEO." Liam smiled, kissing her cheek. "I finalized the divorce paperwork yesterday. The timing couldn't be better. Clean break, clean slate." "Good," Victoria said dismissively. "You were carrying dead weight. Today we elevate." At 9:55 a.m., the doors to the executive suite swung open and the boardroom began to fill. The senior staff of Helios took their seats along the massive mahogany table. Liam and Victoria sat at the right hand of the vacant chairman's seat, exuding confidence. At exactly 10 a.m., the heavy oak double doors at the back of the room opened. A hushed silence fell over the room as a team of 5 sharply dressed, incredibly intimidating corporate lawyers filed in. They carried briefcases and thick binders, taking up positions along the walls. Following them was an older man with silver hair, a sharp jawline, and eyes like flint. It was Arthur Rutherford, though Liam didn't know his face. Arthur didn't give interviews. His photo hadn't been in the press since 1998. But the aura of absolute, unyielding power he projected made the entire room sit up straighter. Victoria leaned over to Liam, whispering urgently, "That must be the managing director of Aegis. Let me do the talking." Arthur walked to the front of the room, standing beside the empty chairman's leather chair. He didn't sit. He looked around the room, his gaze resting on Liam for a fraction of a second longer than the others. There was no emotion in his eyes, just the cold calculation of an apex predator observing a very small, very foolish mouse. "Good morning," Arthur said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried effortlessly. "I am Arthur Rutherford, founder and sole proprietor of Rutherford Apex Holdings, the parent company of Aegis Global." A collective gasp rippled through the senior staff. Even Victoria looked momentarily stunned. They had thought Aegis was the top of the food chain. To hear there was a parent company above it owned by one man standing in their boardroom was staggering. As of this morning, Rutherford Holdings has acquired a 100% controlling stake in Helios Dynamics, Arthur continued, his tone entirely businesslike. This means the previous board is dissolved. All current executive titles are temporarily suspended pending our immediate internal review. Victoria immediately stood up, pasting on her most winning diplomatic smile. "Mr. Rutherford, an absolute honor. I am Victoria Caldwell, Senior VP of Strategy. We have prepared an extensive transition plan that guarantees a 30% increase in efficiency. My colleague Liam Hayes and I are perfectly positioned to spearhead this new era for the company." Arthur raised a single commanding finger. Victoria stopped speaking instantly, her mouth clicking shut. "Miss Caldwell," Arthur said smoothly, "you are mistaken on 2 fronts. First, you are under the impression that this is a negotiation. It is not. Second, you are speaking to the wrong person." Liam frowned, a sudden, inexplicable knot forming in his stomach. "Excuse me, sir," Liam asked cautiously. "If you are the sole proprietor, who else should we be addressing?" Arthur finally smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I am the founder, yes, but I stepped down as CEO of Rutherford Holdings at 9 a.m. this morning. I am here merely as a senior advisor to introduce you to the new chairwoman and absolute majority shareholder of this entire conglomerate. The woman who now owns your company, your contracts, and your professional futures." Arthur turned toward the open oak doors. "Gentlemen, please welcome your new boss." Footsteps echoed in the hallway, slow, deliberate, the sharp click-clack of designer heels on marble. Liam watched the doorway, his heart pounding with eager anticipation. He adjusted his tie, preparing to charm whoever walked through those doors. He expected an older, formidable woman, a ruthless corporate shark. Instead, the woman who stepped into the light of the boardroom made Liam's breath catch in his throat, and then, a second later, completely leave his lungs. It was Chloe, but it wasn't the Chloe he knew. The mousy girl in the oversized beige sweaters and faded jeans was gone. In her place stood a woman radiating terrifying elegance. She wore a tailored, midnight blue Alexander McQueen suit that fit her like armor. Her hair, usually tied back in a messy bun, fell in sleek, perfect waves over her shoulders. Around her neck sat a diamond tennis necklace that caught the fluorescent lights and threw sparks across the room. She looked regal. She looked dangerous. She looked like a trillionaire. The boardroom was dead silent. Victoria looked confused, glancing between Chloe and the other executives. But Liam was frozen, all the blood drained from his face, leaving him a ghastly shade of white. His jaw actually unhinged, hanging slack as his brain short-circuited, desperately trying to process the impossible image in front of him. Chloe walked to the head of the table. She didn't even look at Liam yet. She stood beside her father, who placed a proud hand on her shoulder. "Good morning, everyone," Chloe said. Her voice was steady, resonant, and dripping with an authority Liam had never heard before. "I'm Chloe Rutherford, chairwoman and CEO of Rutherford Apex Holdings. And as of today, your new employer." Liam's legs gave out. He fell back into his leather chair with a heavy thud, gasping for air as if the room had suddenly depressurized. "Chloe," Liam whispered, the words slipping out of his mouth like a dying breath. Chloe finally turned her head slowly, fixing her gaze squarely on her ex-husband. The warmth she used to reserve for him was entirely gone, replaced by a glacial, punishing void. "Mr. Hayes," Chloe said, her voice echoing perfectly in the silent room. "I see you brought your new suit. Let's see if it helps you keep your job." The silence in the penthouse boardroom was absolute, dense enough to choke on. The air filtration system hummed quietly above, the only sound accompanying Liam Hayes's ragged breathing. He stared at his ex-wife, the woman he had discarded like junk mail just 48 hours ago, now standing at the apex of a $1 trillion empire. Victoria Caldwell, however, had not yet grasped the gravity of the situation. Her arrogance, bred from a lifetime of trust funds and Rhode Island country clubs, acted as a temporary shield against reality. She looked from Liam's pale, sweat-slicked face to Chloe's impassive one. "Is this some sort of joke?" Victoria demanded, her voice shrill, shattering the quiet. She planted her hands on the mahogany table. "Liam, who is this woman? Why did you call her by her first name?" Before Liam could force his paralyzed vocal cords to work, Chloe answered. "I am the woman he forced to sign divorce papers on Friday night, Miss Caldwell," Chloe said smoothly, taking the leather chairman's seat at the head of the table. She didn't sit back. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on the polished wood, steepling her fingers. "The woman he described to you as dead weight. The woman whose supposedly mediocre life he was so desperate to escape." A collective murmur erupted among the other executives. Eyes darted back and forth between Liam, who was visibly shrinking in his custom Tom Ford suit, and Victoria, whose perfectly contoured face had suddenly drained of color. "You," Victoria stammered, looking at Liam in horror. "You were married to the heir of Rutherford Apex Holdings." "He didn't know," Chloe interjected. "Liam is a man who only sees the surface of things. He saw a 5-year-old Subaru and a woman who didn't care for luxury brands. He couldn't see the forest for the trees, which, ironically, is exactly why he's entirely unfit to run a data analytics firm." Chloe gestured to the tall, sharp-featured lawyer standing to her left. "This is Gregory Finch, Chief Legal Counsel for Aegis Global. Mr. Finch, please distribute the audit." Finch unclasped his briefcase and began sliding thick, bound folders across the table to each executive. When he reached Victoria and Liam, he merely dropped the folders with a dismissive thud. "Over the weekend, my team conducted a forensic audit of Helios Dynamics operations, focusing heavily on the strategy department overseen by Miss Caldwell and executed by Mr. Caldwell." "Hayes," Chloe announced, her eyes locking onto Victoria's. "What we found was a masterclass in corporate vanity. Inflated quarterly projections, aggressive restructuring that cut vital engineering staff to pad the bottom line, and a staggering misallocation of funds toward executive wellness retreats and client entertainment." Victoria bristled, her defensive instincts kicking in. "Those retreats secured crucial vendor contracts. You cannot walk in here and dismantle years of strategic maneuvering just because you have a personal vendetta against my partner." "Partner," Chloe raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. I thought you two were waiting until after the acquisition to go public. Bold of you to claim him now, considering what's in those folders. Victoria ripped open the folder. Liam did the same, his hands trembling so violently he nearly tore the thick parchment paper. Inside were high-resolution photographs, expense reports, and encrypted emails. Page 4, Chloe instructed the room. You'll see that Miss Caldwell authorized a corporate lease for a Porsche Panamera, citing it as a necessary client-facing asset. Page 7 details the Tribeca Hotel suite rented for late-night strategy meetings on the corporate dime. Meetings that, according to building security logs, involved only Miss Caldwell and Mr. Hayes and rarely lasted longer than an hour. A few of the older board members coughed uncomfortably. Liam squeezed his eyes shut. The humiliation was absolute, a physical weight crushing his chest. This is an outrage, Victoria hissed, slamming the folder shut. You are weaponizing a corporate audit for a petty domestic squabble. I will have my lawyers draft a lawsuit for wrongful termination and harassment so fast it will make your head spin. I am the president-elect of this subsidiary. Chloe let out a soft, chilling laugh. President-elect, Miss Caldwell, Aegis Global didn't acquire Helios Dynamics because we valued your leadership. We acquired Helios because your underlying data compression algorithm, developed by the engineers you just tried to fire, is brilliant. The executive bloat, however, is a liability. We bought this company to gut the C-suite. You aren't being promoted. You are being liquidated. Victoria stood up, her chair scraping violently against the floor. You can't fire me. I have a golden parachute in my contract. If you terminate me without cause, you owe me $6 million in severance. Gregory Finch, the lawyer, finally spoke. His voice was dry, devoid of any emotion. Under Section 4, Clause 12 of your executive contract, severance is entirely voided in the event of gross misuse of company funds and violation of the corporate ethics policy. The Tribeca suite alone constitutes embezzlement. You are terminated with cause, Miss Caldwell. Security is currently packing your office into cardboard boxes. You have 10 minutes to surrender your keycard. Victoria opened her mouth, but no words came out. The realization hit her like a freight train. The money, the status, the power, it was all gone. Extinguished in less than 5 minutes. She looked at Liam, expecting him to defend her, to do something. But Liam was broken. He was staring at the table, completely paralyzed. Get out of my building, Victoria, Chloe commanded, her tone dropping to a dangerous, icy register. Victoria grabbed her purse, her hand shaking, and turned on her heel. She didn't look back at Liam as she practically ran out of the boardroom, the heavy oak doors swinging shut behind her. The silence returned, heavier this time. Chloe slowly turned her gaze to Liam. Liam swallowed hard. He slowly looked up, his eyes meeting hers. He tried to find the woman who used to make him tea, the woman who used to rub his shoulders when he came home, stressed. She wasn't there. He was looking into the eyes of a stranger. Chloe, please, Liam rasped, his voice cracking. I made a mistake. I was blind, yes. You were, Chloe agreed softly. You wanted to be in the 1%, Liam. You wanted to play the game. Fire me, Liam whispered, a tear finally escaping his eye, ruining his carefully curated image. Just fire me and let me go. Chloe smiled, a razor-sharp curve with her lips. Fire you? Oh no, Liam. If I fire you, your contract stipulates a 6-month severance package. And as you so eloquently pointed out on Friday night, I owe you absolutely nothing. Marv. Liam frowned in confusion, a new kind of panic setting in. Then, what? You aren't fired, Chloe said, flipping a page in her binder. However, the Director of Operations role is being eliminated in the restructuring. As of this exact moment, you are being reassigned. You are now a Level 1 Data QA Analyst. Your salary has been adjusted to the industry standard for that role, $45,000 a year. You will be reporting to the basement server room. If you choose to quit, you forfeit any right to unemployment benefits or severance, as it will be considered a voluntary resignation. Liam gasped. $45,000 a year. The lease on his BMW alone was $1,500 a month. The rent on his new luxury apartment in Manhattan was $6,000. He was mathematically ruined. You're trapping me, Liam choked out. I'm giving you a job, Mr. Hayes, Chloe corrected, standing up, signaling the end of the meeting. Something you can use to pay off the massive credit card debt I know you've accumulated trying to impress a woman who just abandoned you. Your new shift starts at 6 a.m. tomorrow. Don't be late. The rest of the week was a blur of systemic degradation for Liam Hayes. He didn't quit. He couldn't. Without a severance package, he had exactly $300 in his checking account. His entire life had been built on leveraging his impressive job title for lines of credit, leveraging his future promotion for the Manhattan apartment. He had signed the lease on just 2 days before the buyout. On Wednesday, his BMW was repossessed directly from the Helios Dynamics parking garage. He had to take the subway back to his new apartment, a hollow, echoing penthouse that he now knew he would be evicted from within 60 days. He tried to call Victoria countless times. On Thursday afternoon, she finally answered. "Victoria, please," Liam begged into the phone, standing in the cramped, windowless server room in the basement of Helios. "We can figure this out. We can start our own firm. We still have each other." A harsh, bitter laugh barked through the receiver. "Are you insane, Liam? I am facing a potential lawsuit from Aegis Global for embezzlement. My reputation in Manhattan is radioactive, and it is entirely your fault." "My fault?" Liam shouted, his frustration boiling over. "You're the one who approved the expenses. You told me she was a nobody." Victoria screamed back. "You told me your wife was a pathetic, unambitious loser. You brought the apex predator of the financial world right to our doorstep, Liam, and you handed her the keys. Do not ever call this number again." The line went dead. Liam stared at the phone until the screen timed out, plunging him into the dim light of the humming server racks. By Friday evening, desperation had entirely consumed him. He waited by the private executive elevators in the Helios lobby. He knew Chloe worked late. Her father's work ethic, it seemed, was hereditary. At 8 p.m., the gold doors chimed and slid open. Chloe stepped out, flanked by 2 massive security personnel. She was wearing a stunning camel haircoat over a pristine white silk blouse, looking every bit the untouchable billionaire. "Chloe, wait," Liam shouted, stepping forward. The 2 guards immediately moved to intercept, their hands resting on their belts, but Chloe raised her hand, stopping them. She looked at Liam. He was a mess. The Tom Ford suit was wrinkled, he hadn't shaved, and the dark circles under his eyes made him look 10 years older. "Mr. Hayes, are you lost? The employee exit is through the loading dock," Chloe said, her voice perfectly polite and utterly devoid of warmth. "I need to talk to you," Liam pleaded, ignoring the guards. He took off his suit jacket, running a hand through his unkempt hair. "Please, Chloe, just 5 minutes. For what we used to have." Chloe checked the Cartier watch on her wrist, a piece worth more than Liam's entire life's earnings. "You have 2 minutes. Walk with me to my car." They exited the glass doors onto the bustling Manhattan street. A sleek black Maybach was idling at the curb, a chauffeur standing at attention by the rear door. "Chloe, I was out of my mind," Liam started, the words tumbling out in a frantic rush. "The pressure of this city, the corporate ladder, it poisoned me. Victoria manipulated me. She made me think I needed to be someone I wasn't. But I loved you. I always loved you. The girl in the apartment in Queens, that's where I was happiest. We can go back. I'll rip up the divorce papers. We can pretend this week never happened. Chloe stopped on the sidewalk. The city lights reflected in her eyes, making them look like polished obsidian. You really don't get it, do you, Liam? Chloe said softly. The anger was gone. What replaced it was far worse. Absolute pity. Get what? Liam asked, reaching out as if to touch her arm, but thought better of it under the watchful eyes of the security detail. You didn't love the girl in Queens, Chloe stated factually. You hated her. You hated her because she didn't validate your fragile ego. You hated her because she didn't care about the shallow, empty things you worship. You left me because you thought I was poor, Liam. Now you want me back because you know I am rich. Liam shook his head violently. No! That's not true, The divorce papers, Chloe interrupted, her tone sharpening. Do you remember why you had them drafted so quickly? While you rushed the process, Liam blinked, thrown off by the sudden pivot. I wanted a clean break before the merger. You wanted to protect your assets, Chloe corrected him, a dark, victorious smile finally gracing her lips. You told me you were destined for the 1%. You had your lawyer draft a hyper-aggressive, ironclad waiver of alimony and an absolute division of assets. You wrote into the contract that neither party could lay claim to the other's future wealth, trusts, or inheritances, because you thought you were going to be a multi-millionaire CEO, and you didn't want me getting a dime. The blood drained from Liam's face as the realization hit him. When you forced me to sign that paper on Friday night, Chloe whispered, stepping just an inch closer so only he could hear, you legally, permanently locked yourself out of $1 trillion empire. You dug your own grave, Liam, and you demanded that I push you in. Liam couldn't breathe. The street noise of New York faded into a high-pitched ringing in his ears. He had done this. He had orchestrated his own total destruction. Chloe turned away from him and walked towards the Maybach. The chauffeur opened a door. Before she stepped in, she paused and looked back at him over her shoulder. Oh, and Liam? Thomas, the head of security, will be waiting for you at the employee entrance on Monday. Your keycard access to the upper floors has been permanently revoked. Enjoy the mediocre life. She slid into the luxurious leather interior of the car. The heavy door closed with a solid, satisfying thud. Liam stood frozen on the sidewalk as the Maybach pulled seamlessly into the New York traffic, disappearing into a sea of red taillights, leaving him completely, utterly alone in the cold. The basement of Helios Dynamics was kept at a permanent, bone-chilling 62 degrees to prevent the massive server racks from overheating. For Liam Hayes, it was a physical manifestation of his new reality, cold, loud, and entirely devoid of sunlight. His new desk was a particle board folding table wedged between two humming mainframes. His supervisor, a 23-year-old MIT dropout named Wyatt, wore graphic tees and insisted that Liam log his bathroom breaks in a shared Google Sheet. Just 2 weeks ago, Liam had been drafting a proposal to outsource Wyatt's entire department to a budget firm in Bangalore. Now Wyatt was writing Liam up for taking a 3-minute personal call. The call had been from Chase Bank. His accounts were overdrawn. Liam's descent from the Manhattan elite had been terrifyingly swift. An avalanche of compounded debt and leveraged lifestyle choices. When you live on the razor's edge of your future potential, losing your status doesn't just push you back a step, it drops you off a cliff. His luxury apartment in Hudson Yards, the one he had leased on the promise of a CEO salary, had served him with a 14-day notice to quit after his first rent check bounced. He had spent his weekends trying to offload his custom Tom Ford suits and Rolex watches on the RealReal, only to find out that the resale market for tailored clothing was merciless. A $5,000 suit barely fetched $400. His American Express Platinum card had been frozen. The maître d' at Down, who used to greet him by name, had blocked his number after Liam tried to beg for a reservation cancellation fee to be waived. He was currently living in a windowless, illegal sublet in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, eating stale bodega sandwiches and taking the R train at 4:30 a.m. just to make his shift. That the physical degradation was nothing compared to the psychological torture. Chloe Rutherford was everywhere. Since taking over as chairwoman and CEO, Chloe had completely rebranded Helios Dynamics. Her face was on the cover of Forbes and the Wall Street Journal. The financial world was obsessed with the beautiful, ruthless heiress who had stepped out of the shadows to execute one of the most aggressive corporate takeovers of the decade. She was hailed as a visionary. Liam had to walk past a massive digital billboard in Times Square every morning that displayed her face, promoting the new Rutherford Apex philanthropic initiative. She looked radiant, untouchable. Meanwhile, rumors of Victoria Caldwell's fate had filtered down to the basement. Victoria had tried to fight back. She had hired a partner at Cravath, Swain & Moore, one of the most terrifying litigation firms in New York, to sue Aegis Global for wrongful termination. It was a spectacular miscalculation. Chloe's legal team, led by the IC Gregory Finch, hadn't just swatted the lawsuit away. They had countersued Victoria personally for fraud, citing the forged expense reports. The Rutherford lawyers buried Victoria in so much discovery paperwork and legal injunctions that her high-priced lawyers dropped her when her retainer ran out. The last Liam heard, Victoria was facing potential indictment by the SEC and had fled to a cheap, humid condo in Boca Raton, Florida, living off her mother's pension. Liam knew he was next. Chloe wasn't keeping him here out of mercy. She was keeping him here to watch him break, to grind his ego into a fine dust. But Liam Hayes was a survivor of the corporate snake pit. He still believed deep down that he was smarter than the people around him. He just needed leverage. He needed a way to force Chloe's hand. That leverage arrived on a dreary Tuesday afternoon during a routine data sweep. Liam's job as a Level 1 QA analyst was mind-numbingly dull. He was tasked with running stress tests on the legacy data compression algorithm that Helios had built its reputation on. It was the same algorithm Victoria had championed, the crown jewel that had supposedly convinced Aegis Global to buy the company in the first place, while running a simulated heavy-load sequence pushing a petabyte of encrypted healthcare data through the system. Liam noticed an anomaly. The processing speed didn't just slow down at fracture. He dug deeper, bypassing his restricted terminal access by using an old administrative login he had hidden on a flash drive during his time as director of operations. As the code unraveled on his monitor, his heart began to pound against his ribs. It wasn't just a glitch, it was a catastrophic structural flaw. The core algorithm was inherently unstable. If Helios scaled up its client base by even 20%, the server load would trigger a cascading memory leak. The system would silently corrupt the data it was compressing. For Helios's biggest clients, major hospitals, defense contractors, and financial institutions, corrupted data meant billions of dollars in liabilities. It meant lawsuits. It meant the complete destruction of the company's valuation. Victoria hadn't known. The original engineers had likely covered it up to keep their funding. And clearly the supposedly brilliant auditors from Aegis Global had missed it entirely. Liam stared at the glowing green lines of code, a slow, malicious smile spreading across his exhausted face. I have them, he thought, the intoxicating rush of power flooding back into his veins. If this leaked to the press, the Rutherford Apex acquisition of Helios would be branded the biggest financial blunder of the century. Chloe's reputation as a prodigy would be shattered. The stock of the parent company would plummet. Liam quickly downloaded the system logs and the raw, corrupted data packets onto his encrypted flash drive. He didn't just have a bargaining chip. He held a thermal detonator right under Chloe Rutherford's multi-billion-dollar throne. He was going to march up to the penthouse. He wasn't going to ask for his old job back. He was going to demand a quiet, ironclad $10 million buyout, a non-disclosure agreement, and a pristine letter of recommendation. He would walk away a millionaire, leaving Chloe to clean up the mess. He unplugged the drive, slicked it into his pocket, and stood up from his folding table. "Hey, Hayes, where do you think you're going?" Wyatt called out from his desk. "You haven't logged your break time." Liam looked at the kid, his posture straightening for the first time in weeks. The arrogance had returned, sharp and venomous. "I'm going to negotiate my severance, Wyatt. Enjoy the basement." The executive penthouse was exactly as Liam remembered it, though the security had been drastically upgraded. Two massive men in tailored suits stood outside the frosted glass doors of the boardroom. "Liam Hayes to see the chairwoman," Liam said, straightening his cheap, wrinkled tie. "You don't have clearance for this floor, Mr. Hayes," the guard on the left said, stepping forward. "Turn around before I call the police. Tell her I have the diagnostic reports on the core algorithm's memory leak," Liam said, his voice dripping with smug confidence. "Tell her I know about the corruption cascade. She has exactly 3 minutes to let me in, or I take a walk to the Wall Street Journal building." The guard narrowed his eyes, pressing a finger to his earpiece. A moment later, his expression remained blank, but he stepped aside, swiping a keycard to unlock the double doors. Liam walked into the boardroom feeling like a conquering general. Chloe was sitting at the head of the mahogany table, reviewing a digital tablet. She wore a stunning ivory blazer, a Cartier Panthère watch gleaming on her wrist. Beside her stood Gregory Finch, the legal counsel, looking as grim and immovable as a tombstone. "Liam," Chloe said, not looking up from her tablet, "I was informed you had a breakthrough in the QA department. It only took you 3 weeks to do what my engineers accomplished in 3 hours." Liam faltered for a second, his smug smile wavering. He marched to the table, pulling the flash drive from his pocket and slamming it onto the polished wood. "Don't play games with me, Chloe," Liam snarled, leaning over the table. "I found the back door in the algorithm. The whole system is a house of cards. If you take on the new state contracts you've been bragging about on Bloomberg, the servers will corrupt petabytes of client data. The liability will bankrupt Helios, and it will drag Rutherford Apex down with it. The great Arthur Rutherford will look like a fool for buying a lemon, and you'll be a laughingstock." Chloe finally set her tablet down. She looked at the flash drive, then up at Liam. Her expression was one of profound, almost pitying boredom. "And your proposed solution?" Chloe asked softly. $10 million, Liam demanded, his voice echoing in the large room. "Wired to an offshore account of my choosing by the end of the day. You sign a mutual non-disclosure agreement, and I walk away. I keep my mouth shut, and you can quietly patch the code before the whole world finds out you bought a defective company." Silence descended on the room. Liam waited for the panic. He waited for Chloe's eyes to widen, for Finch to start sweating. He waited for the validation that he had finally won. Instead, Chloe let out a soft, genuine laugh. It was a terrifying sound. "Mr. Finch," Chloe said, leaning back in her leather chair, "would you please explain the concept of planned obsolescence to my ex-husband?" "Oh." Gregory Finch stepped forward, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "Gladly, Miss Rutherford." Finch looked at Liam with the cold detachment of a scientist observing an insect. "Mr. Hayes, you are operating under the delusion that Rutherford Apex acquired Helios Dynamics for its data compression algorithm. We did not. The Helios algorithm is, frankly, archaic." Liam frowned, his heart skipping a beat. "What are you talking about?" "It's the industry standard. It was the industry standard." Chloe corrected, her voice turning sharp. 3 months ago, a private tech incubator in Silicon Valley, funded entirely by my father's trust, developed a quantum state compression model that is roughly 400% faster and infinitely more stable than Helios code. Liam's breath hitched. Then why buy Helios? To kill it, Chloe stated flatly. She stood up, walking slowly around the massive table toward him. Helios had a monopoly on the enterprise market. Transitioning thousands of hospitals and banks to our new quantum tech would have taken years of brutal marketing and endless bidding wars. So we took the shortcut. We bought the monopoly. Chloe stopped a few feet from Liam, her eyes locking onto his terrified face. We didn't miss the memory leak during the audit, Liam. We found it. In fact, we bought the company specifically because of it. We are intentionally scaling up the server load next week when the Helios algorithm inevitably fractures and begins to fail under the weight. My new company will immediately step in, offering our flawless quantum algorithm as the emergency salvation. We will migrate every single one of Helios's clients to our proprietary system within a month. We look like heroes. We cornered the global market, and Helios Dynamics is quietly dissolved as a tax write-off. The floor seemed to drop out from under Liam. His golden ticket wasn't a secret weapon. It was a carefully orchestrated part of a trillion-dollar machine. You're going to destroy your own company? Liam whispered, horrified by the sheer scale of the manipulation. I am pruning a dead branch to feed the roots, Chloe said coldly. Something a visionary CEO would understand. But you aren't a visionary, Liam. You're a parasite who thought he could outsmart the host. Finch stepped forward, picking up the flash drive Liam had dramatically slammed onto the table. Which brings us to your current predicament, Mr. Hayes, Finch said smoothly. You are a level 1 QA analyst. You do not have security clearance for the core architectural files. How exactly did you acquire this data? Liam's mouth went dry. I ran a standard diagnostic. You used an unauthorized legacy administrative backdoor to bypass federal-grade security protocols, Finch corrected, holding up a printout. We logged your IP address the second you breached the firewall. Under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, the CFAA, accessing restricted corporate trade secrets with the intent to extort is a federal felony. It carries a minimum sentence of 5 years in a federal penitentiary. Liam staggered backward, bumping into a leather chair. His knees felt like water. No, wait, I didn't mean... I was just... You were trying to blackmail a trillion-dollar holdings firm with stolen property, Chloe finished for him, her voice devoid of any sympathy. You really are exactly the man I married, Liam. Greedy, short-sighted, and ultimately pathetic. She turned away from him, walking back to her seat at the head of the table. Gregory, have security escort Mr. Hayes out of the building. And forward the server logs to the FBI Cyber Division. Let them decide if they want to press federal charges. Understood, Finch said. Chloe, please. Liam begged, tears finally spilling over his eyelashes. The arrogant facade was gone, shattered into a million unrecoverable pieces. I have nothing. I'm broke. If I go to prison, my life is over. Chloe paused, looking back at him one last time. She didn't see the man who had broken her heart. She didn't even see an enemy anymore. She just saw a complete stranger, small and insignificant, drowning in a storm of his own making. Your life was over the second you slid those divorce papers across my table, Liam, Chloe said softly. You just didn't realize it until today. The heavy oak doors swung open, and the 2 massive security guards stepped into the room. They didn't ask Liam to leave. They grabbed him by the arms, practically lifting him off his feet. Liam sobbed, a pathetic guttural sound as he was dragged backward out of the penthouse. The last thing he saw before the doors swung shut was Chloe Rutherford, sitting flawlessly at the head of her empire, turning her attention back to her tablet, completely erasing him from her world. And that is the brutal, satisfying end of Liam's corporate nightmare. He gambled his entire life on greed and arrogance, only to find out that the woman he thought was nothing ended up holding all the cards. Chloe didn't just survive his betrayal. She completely dismantled his world with absolute precision. What did you think of that final shocking twist with the algorithm? Did Liam get exactly what he deserved? Or was Chloe's revenge too cold? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you loved this story of power, betrayal, and ultimate karma, please hit that like button to support the channel. Don't forget to share this video with anyone who loves a brilliant comeback, and make sure to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss out on our next thrilling story. Thanks for watching.